Of course, you have immense experience in customs, but even so, I must say I find this book quite an undertaking of extraordinary breadth in trying to look at the at world customs, its context and its meaning. And I suppose to start off with, I can do a little better than to point out that you have an endorsement from Kunio Mikoria, whom I know reasonably well, who is the Secretary General of the World Customs Organization, who says that this book should be on the reading list for anyone in the public or private sector whose work touches on cross-border logistics. That's quite an endorsement.
Certainly is, yes.
Yeah, so if I may, Andrew, I happen to have your book as an ebook, so I think I can share it so people can see it. Can you see that?
Yes.
I suppose to start with, as I say, the breadth of the book is enormous in that you deal with virtually all the topics of customs, really on a worldwide basis rather than with a national focus. Is that fair to say?
It is, and it's always a challenge, certainly when you teach the subject, that in some education environments, such as the United Kingdom, where I provide a lot of teaching, you got students from all over the world, and you can't just say this is the law of the European Union or the law of the United Kingdom or the law of Ireland or anywhere else in the world. You need to bring it in and make it relevant to each and every participant in the room. And that's what I was aiming for, recognizing, of course, and it's lovely what Annette was referring to earlier. It is a global subject, so let's start there. That was my motivation for this.
Yeah, this is quite extraordinary. As a book, I must say, I find it particularly interesting because I do quite a lot of teaching and training. And I would see this rather than something, you know, one of the earlier speakers spoke about self-learning, and I think certainly there's a lot of self-learning in this, but I really think it's ideal as a companion to a course being taught, to a taught course. How would you see its use in that regard?
Certainly, books, this sort of finder audience, at least that's what I'm hoping for, and being somewhere between academia and also a practitioner, you sort of realize you got multiple audiences, and trying to design a book that suits different types of readers is tricky. Yes. But I'm hopeful that I've managed to do it, and certainly Kogan Page is a major global publisher based in the US, based in Europe and in India, with a global distribution. So it's very much in my brief to make sure that I capture many different readers.
Indeed, I particularly like the structure of each chapter, where you have the topic being dealt with. Then you have activities and discussion points where people can try it out for themselves. And finally, you have extensive references for further reading. I think that's a very useful structure for somebody who wants to learn about the particular topic. And I have to mention, as I think I mentioned when we spoke, some of your diagrams are particularly interesting. If I can just call one up, yes. This diagram summarizes the documents that one may need to clear customs. And if that doesn't terrify anybody who is contemplating international trade, I don't know what would. It's a situation, I think that diagram is calculated to inspire fear, Andrew.
There is a hidden agenda there, yes. I mean, part of my career in the past has been was as Deputy Director Trade Facilitation at UK Trade Facilitation Agency. So wherever you see red tape, you call it out. And
Yes.
if you can summarize a lot of red tape in a single slide, that kind of gets your point across very, very quickly. And maybe it's sort of an underlying message, but to dismiss the subject of customs, or maybe subject of compliance with border formalities, as just mere form filling, that's something I wanted to try and just dispel that myth. And certainly, I guess, in the UK-Irish context at the moment,
Yes.
we hear plenty of politicians, certainly in the UK, talking about form filling, and surely that can't be so complicated.
Yeah. How difficult can it be is a phrase we hear quite a lot. Yeah, very is the answer, I think. Yes, it's quite difficult. And I recall, or I have the impression that actually, because of your experience, it didn't actually take you very long to pull all of this together, which I find incredible.
The writing bit probably was the easiest. It was a few months' work. The bigger challenge is it's a book that was long overdue. I should have written it 10 years ago. I've been in this field for a good 20 years in some form or other, either working for companies like PwC or as a freight forwarder, often getting things wrong. As an academic, as a teacher, as a consultant, much of the work is inspired from various contracts I've had over the years. So I'm tremendously grateful from peers. I mean, a lot of the early textbooks I'm aware of actually are from Michael Wolfgang in the German-speaking world. So I've devoured those books when I was younger, and learned a lot from it. I just felt there was something needed with a slightly wider focus within the context of cross-border operations.
So you don't drill particularly deeply into the legal references or the case law behind different.
There will be pointers towards it. The principles will be outlined. And certainly people who so wish to specialize in valuation and transfer pricing or tariff classification, the principles are outlined so that if you're unfamiliar with it, you can find your way in. If you are familiar with it, at least you have a high-level summary. And over the last few years, I've found myself working with so many different communities, sometimes lawyers, often economists. Just recently, I had to work out the cost of Brexit on UK food supply chains, for example.
That was an interesting exercise.
Incredibly interesting exercise. I think after lots of non-disclaimer agreements, maybe some of that will be published very soon.
Good. And I mean, finally, Andrew, I could talk about this for another hour, but we're unfortunately constrained in time. So just to wrap up, this book provides a kind of a worldview of the structure of customs in a way that personally, I must say, I find very accessible and very comprehensible. And then, as you say, it provides references to source material and indeed more, shall we say, more legalistic treatments and more precise treatments of the topics. But one thing that, for me at least, reading it, recurred as a theme is the differences. You know, that there are similarities, many similarities in fundamentals across world customs administrations, but also quite a number of differences. And we heard from an earlier speaker how in some way divergences are beginning to emerge around the world, say between the US and the EU, between different places. And of course, here at home, between your country and mine, we see divergences emerging and indeed showing the potential to multiply. Worldwide, you know, if you were to take it that since the Second World War, but particularly, I suppose, over the last 30 years, the trend has been very much towards globalization and free trade. Do you see a reversal, a splitting up, or are we continuing on this line of homogenizing customs worldwide?
This sort of the academicness of theorizing coming out of me here. But if you see customs as a subject, as an operational challenge at the border. It's sort of where the rubber hits the road, to quote Mark just earlier on. It is subject to those forces that drive it. And if you ever studied international political economy or international relations, sort of there's two big ideas between protectionism and liberalization, and it reflects in trade law and trade disputes and the like. But at the same time, customs within the context of global logistics operations is also subject to forces. Logistics as a subject emerged, I mean, first of all, in the context of the military, going back to the Napoleonic Wars or even the Independence War in the United States. But if you move further and you're sort of looking at modern supply chains, the Japanese management model, and it's all about cost saving, efficiency, tariffs being recognized as a way to rebalance things in some context, but also then recognizing that frictions are undesirable. Then you have new technological opportunities that have unfolded since the 1980s. Some countries in Europe very active, the Netherlands or the UK when it was in the European Union, with its port community systems, single window systems, and many emerging economies providing some very interesting templates. The pathway carries on with blockchain. So you can sort of see how the subject, but also the field of customs is undergoing so many forces that then can deliver different type of outcomes. And if you're a lawyer or an economist, you might see different routes, and you can draw your own conclusions about how that might look like for a customs officer on the ground, or for somebody in task of trade policy trying to balance and reconcile this. So hopefully I've managed to reflect at least a little bit in an introduction about the forces that give the border environment and the job of a customs officer or a practitioner working for business sort of a opportunity to reflect what it is actually they do in their daily life.
That's excellent. Thank you very, very much, Andrew. Really enjoyed speaking to you again. Thank you.
It's my pleasure.